Hi everyone, Chris from BattleGoat Studios with another modding tutorial. The first video that I made was very much an introduction to all the different file stuff, and today I'm going to actually try and make a small mod looking at probably the equipment file a little bit, making my own cache file for my own changes, might even touch the map editor. Not sure how far we'll get in this video, but we certainly have the intention of making some more of these. So I have my screen shared, and just like I'd done last time, in the Steam library, if I go to the properties of Supreme Ruler 2030, installed files, I can browse to get the files for the game. And things can be run directly from there, and that'll be useful as I start to test out my mod. And I have an idea in my head of what I want to do, is that I'm going to change the statistics of a unit and check for myself that everything works when I make some changes. Now, if I'm going to make my own version, like I'd said in a previous video, we encourage modders to start in the scenario folder. In here, we have some of the scenarios that can be seen in-game with their matching folders. And there's actually an extra folder we've left here to help the modders, and honestly, it helps us when we're doing some work on this anyway. This folder of World 2030, well, this matches up to the sandbox of 2030. That initially it won't load in the map editor because its .scenario file is missing. But I can find that. I'm going to go back up a level to the sandbox folder. I'm going to find World 2030.scenario. And I'm going to copy that file. Then back in the scenario folder, I'm going to paste that file. This would now mean if I launch the map editor, I would be able to access the files in this folder. And for today, I'm probably just going to use this same one because there isn't a scenario officially in the game for World 2030, though I could even rename this. Let's actually do that. I'm going to call this World 2031.scenario. And so that my folders match, I'm going to make this as well. So it's going to know, the game is going to know to look for the files for World 2031.scenario in the folder World 2031. And inside there, the files that we're left with is that there is a CSV file, region file. These are probably event files. There's also a maps folder. So this is already set up to be able to do some map editing. But that's not really where I wanted to start. I'm going to go all the way back up. I want to go to the scenario file itself. So right now, it's a straight copy of World 2030. I want to customize some things in here. One thing in particular is I'm going to look for the .unit file. This is the equipment file. We use one just called default, but I intend to make my own copy of it. And I'm going to call this one just chris.unit. It's going to be my file. Now, if I'm going to use my own file, when the game processes these things, it builds what we call a cache file, which packages all the different files together into a single file so that it loads quicker. And that's the one specified here where it says save. If I leave this the same, as I do my modding, I'm going to damage the existing World 2030 scenario because the cache file will get overwritten. So I'm also going to give this a unique name, W_CHRIS. That's going to be my save game name. So I have copied the .scenario, pointed to a new equipment file, which doesn't exist yet, and told it to make this a new cache file, which also doesn't exist yet. But these are all the changes I'm going to make in this file for now. File, save, close that off. Now the default.unit, the existing equipment file, if I go back up to Supreme Ruler 2030, maps, data, default.unit, there's the file. I could, right here, make a copy and then rename this to chris.unit. And that's the file that it's going to go looking for. However, the maps data folder, that's actually the second place that the game engine is going to look for a given file. I'm going to cut this go back to 2030 scenario, go into the folder for my scenario, which has its own maps folder. And here I'm going to make a new folder, again called data. And in this, I'm going to paste that new file that I've created. This is a maps data folder specifically for this scenario. Now, if the game engine doesn't find a file here, it's going to look at the normal maps data folder for the game. But this is a really good way to be able to isolate the files that you're working with as you get ready to share your mod out with other people. So that was one of the files that I created. Before I do too much, I don't even want to modify the file yet. I just want to launch as my new scenario once to check that everything is set up to work properly. So to do this, I'm going to go all the way to the top. I'm just going to run the game from right here. Sandbox has our scenarios. Now when I expand this, there's my world 2031. Now we didn't build a cache file yet, and if ever you're making a mod and you don't have the cache, if I start right now, it's going to build the cache automatically for me. If you've already built one and you've made changes to your file so you need to rebuild it, the option to force it to build the cache is in Game Options, Systems, the last one here where it says Force Cache for Modding. We say for modding to sort of call the attention to it for modders, but you're just telling it, please recache the cache file for this map. And I will point out that if you click on a different one, all these settings are reset. So you need to select the map you want, then change your setting, then click Start. And here you can see it'll show me a pop-up while it's caching. Anybody who did modding during Supreme Ruler Ultimate will remember sometimes this process took upwards of an hour. And now you'll notice I didn't even have time to finish saying that, and it has already finished. Caching, I don't think anything in 2030 will take more than 3 minutes to build a cache. Optimizations were made, a flaw in some of the code was found that was causing it to be exceptionally long, and we finally got that fixed during Supreme Ruler 2030 development. So here it tells me the file that it created, which did reset my list, so I have to go find again. Scenarios, World 2031, Germany is still the default, because the same as World 2030. I haven't changed really anything other than renamed some files and pointed to the new names of these copied files. Let's start it up. So now that I'm into the map, before I go any further, I'm just going to double check that things are looking okay. I have treasury, population, commodities, the leader for my region looks right, I've got units in inventory, and that's really what we expected because we haven't really changed anything yet. We just duplicated some files and changed the names to have new pointers. So, and I chose Germany to do this because I'd done a little bit of checking ahead for what I wanted to play with. Germany has in inventory some of these M113A3 APCs. And so I noticed these ones, if I double click here to get their full record pop up, they drive at 65 kilometers an hour and they have a distance of 483 kilometers. Well, let's increase that from 483 to maybe 2,483. We'll make it go farther on the same amount of gas. It's just an easy thing for us to change, rebuild the files, and know that the changes we're making are getting into the game. All right, so to make that change, I'm going to quit out of the game entirely, all the way to desktop. So if we tried to hand edit some of this stuff, I could go into the scenario folder for the scenario I'm making, World 2031, maps, data, this default.unit file. As has been mentioned previously, we store all our files in plain text. I could do find M113A3. There it is, and then I could sort of go looking through the line. Whoops. go, oh, there's the 483. And so I could change this value directly in the text file. But we provide tools that make it a little easier to manage this stuff. I'm going to use the content editor, specifically the asset manager. And I'm going to file, import. Now, the last video, we went into settings and we made sure to set up that it knew where the game was installed. So it has already found our default folder of maps data. But again, I'm working in a different folder. I need to go back here to scenario, my scenario, maps data. There's the file. Now, when opening the file for an equipment file, a few of the file types, it's going to prompt you with this message to say, is this equipment or NG equipment? NG stands for next gen. That is actually the default that you want in most cases. Equipment means you're bringing in an equipment file from Supreme Ruler Ultimate. We've tried to make these tools capable of importing the data files from the last game and then exporting them in the new file format. It's just to help modders who had made mods for SRU be able to bring them into the new game engine. So the one I'm bringing in is a next-gen equipment file, and I will say OK. And so this will be our first real look at the asset manager. You can see it's loading the file. And as a default view of a certain amount of the data. Now this is only some of the data. Every column is a different value. Every row is a different unit. So this line here, for example, is I'm going to click and drag that to widen it. So this is a strategic bomber, the Sterling 1 from 1940. And right now it's not really sorted, so the very next thing above it is the M22 Locust is a tank from 1943. We got 2052. So it's all over the place. We can click on any of the headers to sort by those dates, which gets us nothing for all these facilities. They have no date assigned to them. And there's a lot more than just these columns. All the values, all the variables are separated in different groups. Each group has a lot of variables. We have shown certain things here, but I could add check marks to see new columns. At any point when you're changing the stuff, there's a button here at the bottom that says default. When you click it, it restores the default columns. For any group, which we refer to them as categories, if I wanted to see all of these particular things, I could add a whole category at a time. I could remove a whole category at a time. I could also choose to just add all columns or remove all columns, though there is a minimum to the all. So these tools allow you to sort of customize your view to find exactly the stuff you're looking for. I'm going to return this to the default. There are also in the top left here filters that you can do. There's a couple defaults here that I could say I want a specific class of units, such as infantry. I don't know the exact ID for that M113 that I'm looking for, so I could search for its name here. Now this is a special field that we created where it searches both model code and equipment name, and it'll return on either of those two. I think if you get rid of that, you actually have to close and reopen the program to bring it back. Our tools are sometimes a little rough around the edges. We'll try and focus our time on developing the game. But let's put in M113. And we can see there's not too many now. And if I specify the A3, there's the exact unit we're looking for. Now the value 483, I don't see it there because we're not actually showing the movement range. That's actually mobility is the category I want. Move range, 483. I'm going to click into that field, change it to 2483. This unit will now travel 5 times as far on the same amount of fuel. The amount of fuel is its fuel capacity. So we've got 2.23 barrels. Normally would only get it 483, now it'll go 2483. All we have to do now is export our changes. There are autosave options. They're not always reliable. I'd suggest manually export until you know what you're doing a little bit and you can recognize if it saves in the wrong place. And so it's going for this is the file I want. Save, replace, yes. Now I'm done in the asset manager. I can Oh, it's still exporting. Hopefully it will cooperate for this. Okay, I assume that worked. I was probably too anxious to close it. Let's open this up again and check that it worked. Import my .unit file, which is an ng equipment. M113A3. Mobility. Move range. 2483. Excellent. Okay. Close that. Done with this for now. Now, so I've changed the file. Now this is that case where the game uses multiple files and brings them together into that cache file. So to actually see my change, I'm going to need to launch the game. Oops, I'm still on the content header. Game. Launch. I increased my volume too much. Sandbox. I need to find the scenario I've been working with. And, right, game options, systems. I need to force a recache. This will get it to read in the .unit file and all the other files and prepare the map again. And I wait a moment while it builds the cache file. All done. Select it again. Start. All right, let's find the M1A3. I'm actually going to filter to just my infantry to make it easier to find in the list. Let's increase the size of the list. M113A3. 2483. We have just changed how far the unit will travel on a single tank of gas. And once you know how to change one stat, you can change virtually anything with some understanding. As was mentioned in a previous video, there is the Supreme Wiki that you can go to, and you can look up the equipment file, and it'll tell you about all the different variables. There's some things that might look like you would be able to just set a value, but they have specific rules. Two examples I'll give. The spotting range. 29 kilometers is how far this unit spots. And it's possible that in the equipment file, this has been assigned a number of 29. But there's an extra thing that's happening in there. In the equipment file, we assign a spot type. And it's very possible that the type 29 has a range of 29, but it doesn't have to. So if you're actually changing the spotting, you need to look up the spotting types first and use a valid number, because 29 might be valid, but 28 might not be a valid defined value and might just return a 0. Another thing to be aware of is that the combat values shown in the game are, in the game we square them. So you have the square root value is shown in the equipment file. And there's been, there's whole topics of discussion about that on the forums if you want to know more about it. But that's something to be aware of, is that the combat value you change in the file, if you put in 3 in the file, that will give a 9 in the game engine. And there's some work being done on how to display some of that. There's still debates going on how to best flow that through. But if you wanted to change the amount of ammunition it had, the strength of the unit, all the sorts of things like that, you would use the asset manager in the equipment file, make your changes, export them, then recache, and you should see your changes right away. So that actually took a bit longer than I expected to get through all of this. I'm definitely going to leave the map editor to another video. But this has shown you how to make your own dot scenario to point to your own modded files, store them in the scenario folder, and we had that brief introduction at how to change the equipment file. Hope you found that useful. Feel free to leave some comments down below. Let me know what other files you'd like me to get into in some later videos. What are the things you'd like me to talk about in terms of modding? And if you're enjoying the game and enjoying modding it, don't forget to hop onto Steam and leave us a Steam review. We very much appreciate that. Thanks for watching. See you next time.